He exposed the truth hiding behind political games. The Attorney General was cornered on his refusal to acknowledge the weaponization of power and the manipulation of justice. What's really happening behind the closed doors of the Department of Justice? You're about to see it all unfold. Stay tuned.
Thank you, Attorney General Bondi. I have noticed that at various times when one of my colleagues is pressing you, you come up with something in their background. So I'll be waiting for my turn, but you don't have to do it right now. So let me get to my questions. One of the things that you mentioned, and I agree with this, that it's really tough on the various federal workforce, including our law enforcement folks, who are not getting paid because of the shutdown. Mm-hmm. I agree with that. But I also think that wasn't the whole story. There is an issue here that's going to affect Americans, whether they voted for President Trump or voted for Vice President Harris, and that is the loss of health care, where on November 1st, everyone who is getting Affordable Care Act help to buy insurance is going to get the notice of premium increases. And I got a letter just today from a Vermont family, nuclear family of 5, husband and wife, 54 and 55, with 3 kids, one of whom has acute myeloid leukemia. And the apprehension that they have is that if we don't solve this problem, and November 1 is a urgent date, then their family premiums will triple. It'll be beyond their ability to pay. So I'm assuming that with respect to the threat to health care for families in your state of Florida, in my state of Vermont, you would share that concern and hope that we would resolve that.
Senator Welch, I would be happy to speak with that family too, because there are many nonprofits that help with children with terminal illnesses, and I'm involved in some in Florida. So we would be happy to talk to you about that. As to health care, the government is shut down. It's my understanding, maybe you're not one of them, but because many Democrats want health care for illegal aliens, and that's what shut down the government.
Let me be clear.
That's one of the sticking points, and I don't know if you voted for that or not.
This actually is important to all of us, and the lament I have is that if this health care goes away, this premium support, it is really going to hurt families in red states and blue states. And in Vermont, I mean, we voted Democratic, but we have a lot of good folks who voted for President Trump, and their health care is jeopardized. And there's a November 1 deadline that is coming up. And the reason I'm saying this is that I think it's important for us to try to work out together a resolution that's going to be beneficial to people you care about in Florida and voted for President Trump, and people I care about in Vermont who voted in some cases for Vice President Harris and some for President Trump. So it's not just Democrats not wanting to negotiate. And in fact, we do want to negotiate, and that's why I'd encourage the president to encourage my colleagues on the Republican side to sit down with us and try to see if we can make some progress. Another topic, with the respect to voting rights in the letter that your voting rights chief sent out, we got one in Vermont, and it's a demand to get all the information on the voting file. And in that letter, in the announcement of that letter, the chief indicated an apprehension about the voting process being taken over by, quote, the left. Now, do you have any information with respect to Vermont about a takeover of the voting process by, quote, the left?
Senator, I'm not familiar with what you're referring to. We are currently involved in voter roll lawsuits in 6 states. Is that what you're referring to?
No, there's a letter that went out demanding that states, including Vermont, provide all the voting file information,
right.
Includes personal information. But when that letter was sent out...
That's perfectly legal.
But there was an assertion by the chief in this division that this was to deal with the fact that the voting process has been taken over by the left. So we got one of those letters in Vermont. And my question to you is, what do you mean by the left? And do you have any evidence that the so-called system has been overtaken by the left?
We must have fair and free elections.
No, I know that, but I'm asking for the specific basis.
And we will have fair and free elections in this country.
Okay,
Senator, I'd be happy to talk to my chief. Who was it who said that?
It was your chief, which I assume you would know who that is. Here's the question here, okay? There is a point of view that is in dispute here about the fairness of elections. But you have the power as the as the Attorney General to use the authority of your office to make demands on states, and you did that with Vermont. That's within your right to do it. I'm not disputing your legal authority to do it.
Is Vermont disputing turning over the information to our office?
Vermont is, the Secretary of State is, and you can resolve that with her. But
and we have every right to have that information.
Yeah, here's
Senator.
where I'm going.
Why wouldn't they want to turn it
You're
over?
a prosecutor with the awesome authority to make the decision that you're going to start an investigation against the state or against an individual. And I know from your experience as a county prosecutor and as the Attorney General in Florida, you took seriously that obligation to have a factual basis before you'd proceed, right?
Senator, I take that role, I take my oath very seriously.
All right, so what I'm
and I
asking-
take fair and free elections in this
No,
country
we
very
all-
seriously.
we all
and that
do.
information, our office is entitled to have that information.
But
And we
the
are
question
involved
here-
in litigation on that, and I
Here's the
assume we'll be
question
involved
I
in
have.
litigation with
We
Vermont.
We have a Republican governor in Vermont. We had our former Republican governor was the treasurer for many years, and also the Secretary of State with election responsibility. What I'm asking is, do you or does your head of this voting section have any factual basis that you can point to that justifies your demand that Vermont turn over all this confidential voting rights information?
Well, it would remain confidential with my office, and you just said that you have a Republican governor, so it doesn't make sense what you just said. We've asked that of every state, Senator.
Right, and I'm asking about Vermont and what the factual basis is, but we can move on. You've mentioned that you can't discuss pending litigation, and I think the committee by and large accepted that answer. But I did notice that you spoke at great length about pending litigation, specifically with respect to the questions Senator Cruz asked you about the sentencing of the Kavanaugh defendant. That's pending, right?
He was sentenced to 8 years.
I understand that, but that's on appeal, right?
We will be appealing.
Right, so that makes it pending litigation. So you made an exception with respect to
No.
the Cruz questions.
Hold on. No,
but you
those
didn't
were-
answer
those were
any of the
things-
questions that you said were pending in litigation from any of my colleagues.
Those were facts that came out at the sentencing hearing. You're welcome to see the transcript of the sentencing hearing
I understand
with all the
that.
gruesome details of what they threatened to do to Justice Kavanaugh and other justices.
I condemn what that person did.
That was the sentencing.
But the point here is that that's pending litigation. You indicated you're going to be appealing. It's your right to do that. And you would not, you use that justification to not answer many other questions.
Justification, you're an attorney, Senator.
Okay.
You realize that.
I do want to go back to Homan. There's a tape, right, with Mr. Homan? I mean, first of all, is there a tape that has audio and video of the transfer of the $50,000?
You would have to talk to Director Patel about that.
No, I'm talking to you.
I don't know the answer, Senator.
Yeah, you do know the answer to that.
Don't call me a liar.
I didn't call you a liar.
You just said I know the answer. I said I don't know the answer.
Well,
You have to talk to Director Patel. What I said is that
Let me put it
investigation was
another way.
closed.
If you don't know, why don't you know whether there was a tape and video?
Senator, I believe that was resolved prior to my confirmation as Attorney General.
Do you think that it is of public interest for the people to know what happened to the $50,000 that the FBI turned over to Homan?
Did you hear what I just said? That was resolved prior to my confirmation as Attorney General. That's why I said I would not know.
It's not resolved. There's $50,000. Homan has it, or somebody has it. Do you have no interest in knowing where it is?
You're not going to sit here and slander Tom Homan. The FBI and Deputy Director Blanche said there was nothing.
I'm not slamming Tom Homan. He got the 50
Tom
grand.
Homan is doing, how do you know that? Tom Homan is doing a great job, as our borders are, keeping your border state safe. You're a border state.
Thank you, Senator Welch. We're going to
Madam President, could I have 1 minute?
Not right now. And
On a
if you wait, we'll
point
talk
of
about
personal
it.
privilege?
Not right now.
The
Senator
witness-
Tillis and many others have been waiting their turn.
I know,
So
but
you
this is
can
1
hold
minute,
until
and
the
it
end.
relates to testimony that she gave
No.
about me.
Senator Tillis, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
What you just witnessed was a critical confrontation between Senator Welch and Attorney General Bondi, which exposed deep flaws in the current justice system and political structure. This was not just a back and forth over policy differences. This was a full-scale reckoning with the weaponization of power. The Attorney General was cornered, forced to confront the blatant manipulation of justice for political gain, and yet he avoided any real accountability. This is the system we have right now, a justice system that should be impartial, but instead is often used as a tool for political leverage. Senator Welch began by highlighting the ongoing government shutdown and the very real consequences it's having on American families, especially those relying on the Affordable Care Act. The healthcare crisis that is brewing, where families are facing skyrocketing premiums, became the central issue. One family in Vermont, for example, is at risk of having their premiums triple due to the shutdown, a situation that could drive them into financial ruin. One of the children in this family is battling acute myeloid leukemia, and the fear of not being able to afford their health insurance is tearing them apart. And how did the Attorney General respond? He didn't offer any solutions, nor did he acknowledge the severity of the situation. Instead, he deflected responsibility, choosing to focus on partisan finger-pointing. What we're seeing is not just a breakdown in communication, this is a systemic issue. It is politicians using real-life problems, like healthcare premiums and shutdowns, as bargaining chips in a larger political battle. This is a dangerous game being played with the lives of American citizens. What happens when people can't afford their medications, or when they're forced to make impossible choices between healthcare and basic survival? That's the question we should all be asking ourselves. And yet, the Attorney General refuses to take responsibility or even offer a compassionate response to these concerns. Instead, his focus shifts to political talking points, completely ignoring the real-life consequences that families are facing. This is not just about healthcare. It's about a pattern of behavior that has been unfolding for years now, the manipulation of justice to serve a political agenda. Senator Welch pointed out how the Attorney General used his office to demand voter information from Vermont without offering any justification for why it was necessary. When asked about this demand for personal voter data, the Attorney General offered no real answers. Instead, he claimed it was part of a broader push for transparency, but when pressed on the specifics, he was forced to admit that he had no evidence to back up the claims of election interference he was using to justify this action. This is not transparency. This is a power grab, an attempt to control the voting process in a way that serves a specific political interest. Senator Welch, on the other hand, raised the important point that this demand for personal voter information was both unwarranted and invasive. He questioned the Attorney General's authority to make such demands without evidence of wrongdoing. And what was the Attorney General's response? He deflected, shifting the blame to Vermont and making baseless accusations about the state's failure to cooperate. This is the kind of political maneuvering that we've seen time and time again, where personal power becomes more important than the integrity of the system. This is not the first time we've seen the weaponization of the justice system under this administration, and it likely won't be the last. The Attorney General's refusal to answer direct questions and explain his actions is indicative of a larger problem in Washington. Institutions are meant to protect the people, but what happens when they start to protect themselves? When the very systems meant to safeguard fairness and justice are manipulated by those in power to protect their own agendas, we all lose. We cannot allow this trend to continue. The emotional weight of this issue cannot be overstated. Real American families are hurting right now, suffering due to political games, and they are being ignored by the very people who are supposed to protect them. We are talking about families whose healthcare premiums are about to triple, whose children are facing life-threatening illnesses, and who are being left to struggle on their own. How can we, as a nation, allow this to happen? How can we justify continuing to support a system that doesn't care about the people it is supposed to serve? How can we let our institutions be used to protect the powerful while leaving everyday Americans to suffer the consequences? The call for accountability here is loud and clear. The Attorney General's office has an incredible amount of power, but with that power comes an equally important responsibility to act in the best interests of the American people. When that power is used used for political gain, when it is used to protect the interests of the elite rather than the needs of the people, we are looking at a system that is fundamentally broken. No one is above the law, as Senator Welch pointed out. But when political interests take precedence over the law itself, we are left with a situation where those in power are untouchable, while the American people are left to pay the price. We need action. We need to demand that our leaders act in the best interests of the people they represent, not in the interests of their political parties. We need to restore the integrity of our justice system and ensure that no one, regardless of their political affiliations, is above the law. We cannot let these abuses of power go unchecked. If we do, we risk losing the very foundation of our democracy. It's time to hold these individuals accountable. It's time to demand the transparency and fairness that we are entitled to as citizens of this country. We cannot afford to sit back and let our systems be corrupted any longer. The Attorney General's refusal to answer questions about the actions taken under his watch is a glaring red flag. The American people deserve answers, and they deserve a system that works for them, not against them. As we close, we have to ask ourselves, what kind of country do we want to live in? Do we want to live in a country where our leaders are held accountable, where our justice system is fair, and where power is used for the good of the people? Or do we want to live in a country where corruption runs rampant, where the law is bent to protect those in power, and where the voices of the people are ignored? The answer is clear, and it's up to all of us to make sure that we demand the change that is necessary to ensure a better future. Share this video, subscribe, and stay loud, because the fight for justice and transparency isn't over. We must continue to demand accountability, and we must ensure that those who abuse their power are held to the highest standards. The American people deserve nothing less.